The soft hum of Fort Independence's atmospheric shields blended with the faint bustle of activity from its central plaza. Commander Mason Holt leaned against a metal railing overlooking the colony's wide expanse, a stark contrast of human resilience carved into the barren terrain of Zeta 5. The air smelled faintly of recycled oxygen, a constant reminder of the colony's fragility. Holt's piercing blue eyes scanned the horizon, though his thoughts were miles away. The colony was his responsibility, a fragile line between hope and annihilation. His wrist communicator chimed, snapping him out of his reverie. "Commander!" Lieutenant Nora Vance's voice was sharp and urgent. "You need to see this." Minutes later, Holt stood in the colony's operations center. The room was dim, illuminated by holographic displays projecting tactical maps and alien glyphs. Vance pointed to the largest screen, her dark brows furrowed. "We intercepted this transmission 30 minutes ago," she said, crossing her arms. The audio clip crackled to life, a guttural, alien language filling the room. A synthetic voice translated. "Fort Independence will fall. Prepare for eradication. The Grecian reclaim what is rightfully theirs." Holt's jaw tightened. "How credible is this?" "Very. Long-range sensors confirm multiple Grecian signatures heading our way." A tense silence filled the room. The Grecian Dominion wasn't known for idle threats. Holt turned to the gathered officers. "Status on our defenses?" "Shields are at 60% efficiency," said Chief Engineer Marcus Tan, wiping sweat from his brow. "We've patched the eastern arrays, but the grid's old. A concentrated assault will burn through it." "And weapons?" "Standard colony grade. Turrets and missile batteries," Vance said. "Enough to repel raiders, not an organized fleet." Holt nodded, his mind already working through the implications. Fort Independence wasn't a military outpost. It was a settlement, a beacon for humanity's expansion into the stars. But the Grecian wouldn't care. To them, humans were an invasive species encroaching on their domain. "They're testing us," Holt said finally, his voice calm but firm. "They want to see how far they can push before we break. Or they just want us gone," Vance countered, her tone clipped. Holt placed a hand on her shoulder. "And they'll learn we don't break." By nightfall, the colony buzzed with frantic preparation. Settlers carried supplies, engineers reinforced barricades, and soldiers loaded ammunition. Holt walked among them, offering a quiet word of encouragement where needed. At the northern gate, he found Dr. Elias Grant adjusting a portable shield generator. The older man's hands shook slightly as he worked. "Elias," Holt said, "you should be in the shelters." "And leave this to chance?" Grant replied without looking up. "If these shields hold, it might buy us a few extra minutes." "Every second counts, Commander." Holt admired the doctor's resolve, even as his stomach churned at the thought of what was coming. "Just make sure you're safe when the time comes," Holt said, moving on. In the command center, the senior staff gathered around the central table. A holographic map displayed the Grecian fleet's projected trajectory, a straight line toward the colony. "Initial contact in 18 hours, Vance reported. "They'll be in firing range within 20. Holt studied the display, his fingers drumming against the table. "They'll expect us to focus all defenses on their main force." "So we won't." Vance frowned. "What are you suggesting?" "We'll set traps along their approach vector," Holt explained. "Decoy drones, proximity mines, and sensor jammers. Keep them guessing. When they divert to deal with the disruption, we hit them hard." "It's risky," Tan said, his voice hesitant. "So is sitting here waiting to die," Holt replied. "We're outnumbered and outgunned. Our only chance is to make them fight on our terms." Vance nodded slowly. "I'll coordinate with the engineers. We'll need to rig the decoys fast." "Good," Holt said. "And spread the word to the settlers. They need to know what's coming." The announcement went out colony-wide. Holt stood in the plaza, addressing the gathered crowd. Their faces reflected a mix of fear and determination. "The Grecian think they can push us out," Holt said, his voice carrying across the square. "They think we'll run, that we're weak. But they've underestimated us. We're human. We've survived worse, and we'll survive this. Murmurs of agreement rippled through the crowd. This isn't just about Fort Independence, Holt continued. It's about showing them what we're made of. We stand not because it's easy, but because we must. For our families. For our future. Applause broke out, tentative at first but growing stronger. Holt stepped down, his expression grim. The speech had served its purpose, but he knew the battle ahead would test every ounce of their resolve. Back in the command center, Holt stared at the tactical map, lost in thought. Vance approached, her expression unreadable. You think they bought it? She asked. The settlers? Holt asked, glancing up. Vance shook her head. The Grecian. You think they'll fall for the traps? They will, Holt said. Their arrogance will be their downfall. Let's hope you're right, Vance said, her voice tinged with doubt. Holt watched as she walked away, then turned back to the map. His fingers traced the Grecian fleet's projected path. They'll learn, he muttered to himself. One way or another. As the colony settled into an uneasy night, Holt sat alone in his quarters. The weight of command pressed heavily on his shoulders. He pulled out a small holoframe, its display flickering to life with an image of Earth, a distant memory now. We'll make it, he whispered, his voice resolute. No matter what it takes. The Grecian fleet loomed closer, a storm on the horizon. But Mason Holt had faced storms before, and he intended to weather this one. The first Grecian warships breached the edge of Fort Independence's long-range sensors as the colony roused itself for battle. Their sleek, obsidian hulls glinted in the dim light of Zeta 5's pale sun, an ominous contrast against the empty expanse of space. In the command center, Commander Mason Holt stood at the central console, his eyes fixed on the holographic projection of the Grecian fleet. Icons representing the enemy vessels moved in precise formation, their approach calculated and confident. Report, Holt said, his tone crisp. Lieutenant Nora Vance responded without missing a beat. Enemy fleet confirmed at 17 vessels. Composition, 10 standard warships, 6 escorts, and 1 flagship. Holt's gaze shifted to the largest icon at the center of the formation, the flagship, Valkyrie. And our decoys? Deployed and holding position, Vance said. Proximity mines are primed, and sensor jammers are online. Grecian scanners should pick them up within minutes. Good, Holt said. Let's see if they take the bait. Minutes later, the first phase of Holt's plan unfolded. A Grecian scout ship veered off course, drawn toward a cluster of decoy drones mimicking the energy signatures of human fighters. The holographic display tracked its movements as it closed in on the false targets. Wait for it, Holt murmured. The scout ship crossed the threshold. The mines detonated in a synchronized burst, obliterating the vessel in a flash of light. Direct hit, Vance reported, a rare smile tugging at her lips. The Grecian fleet faltered momentarily as their formation adjusted to the unexpected loss. Then the flagship transmitted a flurry of orders, and the warships began firing indiscriminately at the decoys. They're reacting just as we expected, Holt said, a flicker of satisfaction in his voice. But the Grecian weren't entirely fooled. Their scanners quickly recalibrated, identifying the decoys for what they were. The fleet resumed its advance, this time more cautious, more deliberate. They're learning, Vance said. So are we, Holt replied. Prepare the artillery. We'll give them something real to chew on. The first salvo from the colony's surface-to-space batteries streaked into the sky, targeting the lead Grecian warships. The projectiles exploded in bursts of kinetic energy, forcing the enemy ships to scatter. Adjust firing solutions, Holt ordered. Keep them on their toes. The colony's defenses came alive, every turret and missile launcher working in concert. Explosions rippled through the enemy ranks, though their shields absorbed most of the impact. Inside the command center, tension mounted as the Grecian returned fire. Bright streaks of plasma lit up the sky, slamming into the colony's shields. The force of each impact reverberated through the ground like distant thunder. Shields at 40%, Chief Engineer Marcus Tan reported, his voice strained. "We're not going to hold if this keeps up." "They won't get the chance to keep it up," Holt said. "Nora, status on the Valkyrie?" Vance pointed to the flagship's icon on the display. "They're holding back, letting the smaller ships do the dirty work. Typical Grecian arrogance." Holt's lips pressed into a thin line. "Not for long. Prepare the rail cannons. Target their flagship." "Are you serious?" Tan asked, incredulous. "Those things barely have enough power for their escorts, let alone." "Do it," Holt said, cutting him off. As the colony's rail cannons powered up, Holt turned to Vance. "What's their response to the traps?" "They're probing," Vance said. "Testing for weaknesses." Holt nodded. "Then we'll give them one." The Grecian fleet pressed forward, their formation tightening as they neared the colony. On Holt's orders, a section of the shields on the colony's western perimeter flickered and dropped, exposing a seemingly vulnerable section of the settlement. Predictably, the Grecian warships moved to exploit the gap, pouring fire into the exposed area. The ground shook violently as plasma blasts tore into the surface, but there was nothing of value in their line of fire, only a series of concealed missile silos. "No," Holt said. The missiles launched in unison, streaking upward and impacting the Grecian ships at point-blank range. 2 warships disintegrated instantly, their debris scattering across the battlefield. "Got them!" Vance shouted. "Don't celebrate yet," Holt said, his tone grim. "Here comes the Valkyrie." The Grecian flagship advanced, its massive cannons charging with a menacing glow. The colony's rail cannons fired in response, their high-velocity projectiles slamming into the Valkyrie's shields. The Grecian vessel barely flinched. "Shields are holding," Vance reported. "Then we keep firing," Holt said. The Valkyrie retaliated, unleashing a concentrated barrage that struck the colony's main shield generator. Sparks flew as consoles in the command center overloaded, and the lights flickered ominously. "Shields down to 15%, Tan shouted. Holt gritted his teeth. "We need more time. Deploy the reserve fighters." A squadron of human-piloted starfighters launched from the colony's hangars, engaging the Grecian vessels in a desperate dogfight. The pilots fought valiantly, weaving through enemy fire and landing precision strikes where they could. But the Grecian were relentless. One by one, the human fighters fell, their wreckage crashing to the surface below. "Commander, we can't keep this up," Vance said, her voice edged with desperation. "We don't have to," Holt said. "We just need to survive long enough for Phase 3. As the battle raged, Holt activated a secure communication channel. On screen, a small team of engineers and technicians awaited his orders. "Is the infiltration team ready?" he asked. "Yes, Commander," the team leader replied. "We're standing by." "Good. You launch in 10 minutes. Target the Valkyrie's command systems. We'll keep them distracted." "Understood." Back in the command center, Holt addressed his officers. "This is it. The Grecian think they have us cornered, but we're about to turn the tables. Keep the pressure on their fleet. Every second counts." Vance nodded, her determination renewed. "Yes, sir." Holt turned back to the tactical map, his mind racing. The Grecian were powerful, but they were predictable. And Holt knew how to use that against them. As the infiltration team's vessel launched toward the Grecian flagship, Holt allowed himself a fleeting moment of hope. The battle was far from over, but the Grecian were about to learn a hard lesson. Humanity didn't go down without a fight. The infiltration team's small craft glided silently through the chaos, a tiny blip among the swirling dogfights and glowing wreckage above Fort Independence. Designed to evade detection, the stealth shuttle relied on Grecian overconfidence to slip past their defenses unnoticed. Inside the shuttle, Lieutenant Kai Moreno gripped his harness, his dark eyes scanning the Grecian flagship Valkyrie through the viewport. The massive vessel loomed ahead, a fortress of alien design bristling with weaponry. "Approaching target," the pilot announced, her voice calm despite the tension. "Activating cloaking measures." Moreno turned to his team, 6 figures clad in matte black combat suits. This is it. Once we breach, no turning back. Stick to the mission. The squad nodded in unison, their faces grim. In the command center, Commander Mason Holt monitored the shuttle's progress. The holographic map displayed the Valkyrie as an ominous red icon, the infiltration team's craft a faint green dot on a perilous trajectory. Are they in position? Lieutenant Nora Vance asked, her fingers dancing over her console. Almost, Holt replied. We just need to buy them a little more time. The colony's surface-to-space batteries continued their barrage, targeting the smaller Grecian vessels to keep the flagship's escorts occupied. Explosions dotted the sky, the Grecian fleet's tight formation beginning to fray. They're spreading out, Vance observed. Looks like they're trying to regroup. Good, Holt said. Let them. The more distracted they are, the better our chances. The shuttle latched onto the Valkyrie's hull with a magnetic clamp, a barely audible thud reverberating through its frame. Moreno and his team moved swiftly, attaching plasma cutters to a section of the Grecian armor. The cutter hissed as it carved through the alloy, a glowing circle forming in seconds. Moreno kicked the panel inward, revealing a dimly lit maintenance corridor. Go, he whispered, motioning his team forward. The squad moved with practiced precision, their boots making no sound on the metallic floor. Alien glyphs adorned the walls, their meaning lost on the humans but serving as a constant reminder of where they were. Keep comms tight, Moreno instructed, his voice barely audible over the squad's secure channel. We're not here to fight, only to disable their systems. The team reached the first junction, where the corridors branched off in multiple directions. A holographic map of the Valkyrie flickered on Moreno's wrist display. He studied it quickly, then pointed. Power cores this way, he said. Hail, Quan, you're with me. The rest of you, secure the backup systems. No matter what, those engines stay offline. Understood, one of the soldiers replied, splitting off with the others. As Moreno's team moved deeper into the flagship, the atmosphere grew heavier, the hum of alien machinery a constant reminder of the ship's lethal purpose. They reached the power core, a massive, pulsating sphere encased in a lattice of conduits and energy feeds. Grecian guards patrolled the area, their elongated forms moving with eerie grace. Take positions, Moreno ordered, signaling for silence. The team moved into cover, their weapons trained on the guards. When the patrols shifted, Moreno gave the signal. Now. Suppressors hissed as the team's rifles fired precise shots. The Grecian guards dropped soundlessly, their bodies crumpling to the floor. Clear, Quan said, moving to the core. Hale produced a device resembling a cylindrical beacon, attaching it to the core's primary conduit. Lights flickered along the cylinder as it interfaced with the alien technology. Disruptors online, Hale reported. We're ready to overload. Do it, Moreno said. Hale activated the disruptor. The core pulsed violently, sparks flying as the device scrambled its systems. Alarms blared throughout the ship, the Valkyrie shuddering as its power flickered. They know we're here, Moreno said. Move! On the surface, Holt watched the holographic display as the Valkyrie's icon flickered erratically. Something's happening, Vance said. Their shields are dropping. Moreno's team must have hit the core, Holt said, adrenaline surging. Target the flagship, now! The colony's rail cannons fired, their projectiles tearing into the Valkyrie's exposed hull. Explosions rippled across the ship's surface, secondary detonations spreading like wildfire. They're losing cohesion, Vance said, her voice triumphant. Holt's expression remained tense. It's not over yet. Inside the Valkyrie, Moreno's team sprinted down the corridors as Grecian reinforcements closed in. Plasma bolts scorched the walls around them, forcing the humans to return fire in short bursts. Shuttle's 2 decks below, Moreno said, his voice strained. They reached a service hatch and slid down a narrow access ladder. The shuttle waited where they'd left it, but Grecian soldiers swarmed the area. Cover me, Moreno said, taking aim. The team opened fire, suppressing the enemy long enough for Moreno to reach the shuttle's controls. He activated the magnetic release, freeing the craft from the Valkyritha's hull. "Get in!" he shouted. The team piled into the shuttle as Grecian soldiers fired on them, plasma bolts ricocheting off the craft's armor. The pilot engaged the engines, and the shuttle rocketed away, narrowly avoiding a barrage of enemy fire. In the command center, cheers erupted as the Valkyrie exploded in a blinding flash, its core finally succumbing to the overload. The remaining Grecian ships faltered, their formation collapsing as they scrambled to retreat. "We did it," Vance said, her voice a mix of relief and disbelief. Holt didn't allow himself to celebrate yet. "Track their movements. Make sure they're leaving for good." The holographic map showed the Grecian fleet retreating, their icons dwindling as they vanished into the void. "They're gone," Vance said. Holt exhaled deeply, the weight on his shoulders lifting slightly. "Get me Moreno's team. I want to make sure they're safe." The shuttle landed on the colony's surface, battered but intact. Holt was waiting at the hangar, his face a mixture of relief and pride as Moreno and his team disembarked. "You did it," Holt said, clapping Moreno on the shoulder. "Team effort, sir," Moreno replied, though a faint smile betrayed his exhaustion. Holt nodded. "Take some time to rest. You've earned it." As the team dispersed, Holt looked out at the horizon. The Grecian had been defeated, but the scars of the battle remained. Fort Independence had survived, proving humanity's resilience once again. But Holt knew this was only the beginning. Out here, on the edge of known space, predators lurked in every shadow. And humanity would have to stay vigilant to survive.